Go.
Okay, we are in the lab. We're doing our heating plants, we're doing our gas furnaces, and as I told you, we were going to put together a short little instructional video about furnace service, furnace tune-up, what it's about, how we generally do them. I had the opportunity to go with Kevin from Ileana Heating and Air Conditioning out of Cedar Lake, Indiana, earlier this year, and he in essence did exactly what we've been doing in the lab. We've taken the burners out, we've been servicing them, we've been inspecting the heat exchanger. Kevin's going to show you what this looks like while he's out in the field actually doing this in a customer's home. So we're going to go ahead and put our furnace back together. I'm going to let you see some of the videos, the short segments that I put together with Kevin, and at the end of that I'll come back and we'll talk about it again. Alright, let's get started.
I'm going to turn your heat on. And I'm going to deliberately turn it up kind of high so it stays running for a few minutes. Bear.
Yeah. I'm going to say, Kevin, you have a lot of different ways that you can actually inspect heat exchangers because some of these furnaces are now becoming smaller and smaller. What are some of the tools you have available?
Well, I usually carry at least one large mirror, like a 2-inch mirror. I usually carry a 1-inch mirror, and I have got a wide variety of different cameras that I use. I've got everything from a normal borescope all the way to little flexible cameras. I've even got one camera that was actually made for inspecting teeth, so it looks at a right angle.
Wow. You're almost a dentist then too, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin, I see you're taking the gas line apart. In this compact furnace, that's about the only way you're going to be able to get to pull the burners out, isn't it?
This is true for this model. The only way, and really especially if you run on propane, you have to take and wire brush those burners every time.
Yeah, because propane burns at a higher temperature, and they get a little bit dirtier a little faster.
A little bit more moisture in the gases, I understand, too.
Yeah, exactly. And these burners, boy, you can kind of see up here the way these burners are tucked back in there behind that piece, and so you just have to pull everything apart. This takes quite a lot more time than some of the older style condensing style furnaces.
That's true.
But if you want to do the job appropriately, if you want to be a high-end professional like Kevin is, this realistically is what you have to do. Okay, as you can see, Kevin has pulled the burner box out. So there are the tubes for the heat exchanger. And what we're going to see right here is the actual burners themselves. You can see the flame sensor right there, and you can see the burners right there. And he's going to be able to pull these out to inspect those to make sure there's no problems on the sides and get to the flame sensor easily enough and make sure they're nice and clean. They have to be clean.
Did you get a shot of how rusty they were to begin with?
Yes, I did actually, and I think it's interesting, and I don't want to try and talk over the drill, but I think it's interesting to see the crossovers, and you said some of them actually have a little bit of rust on them on occasion, and it becomes very important to make sure those crossovers allow the gas to move from one burner to another.
Yeah, you don't want it to build up gas before the next burner lights across the board. That can be bad.
That could be nasty. But as you and I were talking about earlier, it's absolutely essential to get these burners out and get them cleaned.
Definitely.
Alright, now Kevin's doing one of the most important things. He's cleaning the flame sensor, because without that flame sensor being clean, it may not register a flame, and as a consequence, the burners will shut down just within a couple of seconds of the gas valve opening. And one of the important things to remember, I've told you this before, do not use sandpaper. Use a wire brush. Isn't that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, I always use a wire brush. They say that the sandpaper leaves silicates behind on the rod, which hampers the conduction of electricity through the flame. So with using a stainless steel brush, if anything, I'm leaving stainless steel residue on stainless steel.
Exactly, and that way it works real well. Alright, well, as we see here, the burners are still out, and now the thermal cutout, the main limit, is out, and Kevin is connecting up his borescope, and he's going to take a look inside at the heat exchanger. Now, this is a relatively new furnace. It's not a very old furnace, but this is one of the parts that we still have to look at. It doesn't matter what the age is. You still got to look back in there. And you can see him inserting that into one of the tubes, and then he's inspecting that. He's getting an idea of what it looks like in there. And I know you're not going to be able to see very well on the screen for the video. That's why you need to be in class, so that you can see an actual borescope being used in the class, in the lab. So as you can see, some of the basic housekeeping after Kevin's done the burners and inspecting the heat exchanger. He's down there making sure the blower compartment is clean, looking over the IFC to make sure that everything looks in order, no loose wires and so on. Now, one of the nice things is Kevin puts this all back together. One of the things that he also uses, and I didn't show you this part, but this is the reason that you come to class. He's got this sheet for hot surface igniters. It tells you what the model of the hot surface igniter is, which specific equipment, if there's any, that it works on, and what the room temperature resistance, the ohms, should read on this. And this way, when you're doing this, particularly just a service call like a tune-up, this way you specifically know if the hot surface igniter is good, if it's weak, if you should recommend a new one. It tells you about the warm-up time. You have to keep information like this around. The reality is you cannot memorize everything, particularly because there's so many models around nowadays. So Kevin's going to get this put back together, and we're going to fire it up here in just a minute and make sure that all the proper temperatures and pressures are working. Alright, well, now the furnace is on. Burners are back on. We see that we've got a dual port manometer that's connected up. We see we've got the multimeter that's connected so he can check his flame sensor reading. We see 3.4 on the microamperage on his flame sensor. And if we look up here, we can see that Kevin has got his thermometer set so that he can start taking temperature rise, because we need to know what the temperature rise is through here. We've talked about it in class. We have to know that information. You have to get the temperature rise. And he gets the opportunity to adjust the gas valve if the gas pressure is a little too high or a little too low. Remember what we talked about, and especially if it's too high, you'll end up tripping out flame rollouts and thermal limits and some of those other things. So you want to make sure the gas pressure is right where it needs to be. This is a natural gas furnace, so he's going to get it right about 3.5 inches of water column. And once he's there,
He's got it dialed in perfectly. So he is just about done. We'll be back in just a minute.
Okay, welcome back. You've seen Kevin. I want to thank Kevin from Ileana Heating and Air Conditioning out of Cedar Lake for allowing me to disrupt a little part of his day. You know, videotaping it and asking questions, he had to stop, so it took him a little bit longer than normal. But what you saw there were the exact same things that we've been doing in the lab. He disassembled the furnace, he was inspecting the heat exchanger, testing the pressure switches. All of those tools that we've been using, you basically see he's been using too. Now remember, use all the tools that you have. You're going to be looking at dual port manometers and magnehelic gauges and something to take temperature rise. Remember what I said about temperature rise. I still think you need a carbon monoxide detector. Some companies don't want you checking carbon monoxide on a basic tune-up, some do. That's kind of up to whoever it is you work for. And of course the borescope, don't forget the borescope. In most of these newer furnaces you cannot inspect any part of the heat exchanger without it. And use some of the other tools that I've been giving you, because some of these things, you know, the hot surface igniters, the ohm levels in there, these things are going to help you out a great deal. And when you start doing the maintenance, like we've been pulling these out, and I've been telling you, sequence of operation, understand how they're different, because the standing pilot furnaces, the hot surface ignition furnaces, the spark ignition furnaces, all of them have just slight differences in how they do things. So pay attention to that. That'll help you in your troubleshooting as you get down the road, further down the road in your education, and as you're working for someone. All right, that really kind of wraps up the furnace tune-up. If you got any questions, you guys know where to find me. See you later.